In the quiet village of Omuozala, where the sun rose slow and steady like an elder climbing a hill, there lived a couple whose home had known more silence than laughter, more prayers than songs, and more tears than sleep. They were called Nady and Ifioma, and for over 2 decades, the couple carried an emptiness that echoed through their compound like an unfulfilled prophecy. Ifioma had cried her womb dry. Every month she waited, hopeful, kneeling before every prophet, herbalist, and healer who claimed to have seen a vision. Her arms longed to carry a child, even for a minute. Nady, strong and kind, watched his wife fade like smoke, helpless as the days became years. In Umuozala, people whispered. Some said the gods had cursed them. Others said it was a punishment from the past. But no one dared say it to their faces. Then, like a miracle whispered by the winds of fate, Ifioma took ill one Harmattan morning. At first, they feared it was another sickness, another heartache waiting to bloom. But the village nurse squinted at her belly, felt her pulse, and let out a quiet gasp. Ifioma, she whispered, you carry a life inside you. For minutes, Ifioma could not breathe. Then she cried, loudly, with all her body, the kind of cry that opened doors in the spirit, the cry that only women who have touched the edge of madness know. When she got home and told Nady, the man who never wept did something that shook even the mango trees in their yard. He knelt in the dust, raised his hands to the sky, and wept. When the child was born, the whole village gathered. It was a boy. He came into the world with a strong cry, fists curled tightly, as if he had fought many battles before arriving. They named him Oena, meaning father's heart, for he was all that the man had. Nady and Ifioma poured every drop of their lives into the boy. They sold the only piece of land Nady had inherited to send Oena to a good school in Enugu. Ifioma, once proud and elegant, now carried baskets of vegetables to the market daily just to afford his books. People mocked them sometimes. Your only child, what if something happens? But they ignored it. Their eyes were fixed on one thing, their son's future. Oena didn't disappoint. He grew fast, smart, and determined. After university, he got a good job in Lagos. He sent money, called every Sunday, promised to build them a house. Joy returned to the house in Umuozala. Neighbors watched in envy as Ifioma walked proudly to church in her new wrapper. Nady would tell anyone who cared to listen, my son will come back and open a hospital here. He will marry and give me grandchildren. The line of Nady will not end. But fate is not always kind. It was a rainy Tuesday when the news came. Oena had been coming back from work when a truck lost its brakes and slammed into his car. He died on the spot. Gone. Just like that. The call came at night. Ifioma answered it and screamed. Nady took the phone and stood like a tree cut from its roots. Silence swallowed the compound. The burial was held in Lagos. Nady and Ifioma couldn't even afford to see his body. A neighbor who lived in the city handled everything. The couple sat in their compound in Umuozala while others cried on their behalf. From that day, time stopped for them. Ifioma no longer went to the market. Her hair turned gray almost overnight. Nady stopped greeting people. He stopped eating. Some nights, he sat in front of the small clay grave they had built in their backyard. Just a marker, really, since his body wasn't buried there, and talked to it as if Oena was there. Their house grew quiet again. The laughter was gone. But this time it was worse. Because this time, they knew what they had lost. Until one day, many years later, a car stopped in front of their gate. It was a market day in Umuozala, but the wind that blew that morning was different. It carried a scent unfamiliar to the village. Engine oil, city perfume, and something else. A presence that stirred the old spirits resting beneath the earth. Women at the stream paused in their gossip. Even the goats tied under thatched roofs bleated louder than usual. Something was coming. Nady was sitting under the Udala tree beside the empty grave marker, his walking stick buried in the sand. His once proud shoulders were now hunched like banana leaves after a storm. Ifioma was inside, humming a broken tune, grinding dried bitter leaf with a rusty mortar that had not sung in years. Then they heard it, the crunch of tires on red sand, the sound of a vehicle stopping in front of their gate. Nady frowned. Visitors were rare. Their compound, once a place of laughter and gatherings, had become a silent shrine of sorrow. He slowly rose to his feet, his heart thumping, not in fear, but with the stubborn curiosity of a grieving man who had buried hope. "Papa!" A voice called from beyond the gate. It was a female voice, cheerful, unfamiliar. "Papa, Mama." "Good afternoon, O." Nady and Ifioma exchanged a puzzled glance. Ifioma's hands dropped from the mortar. Her breath caught. No one had called them Mama or Papa in years, not since the world shattered. They stepped out together, one slow foot after the other, and what they saw at the gate made Ifioma's legs buckle slightly. A young woman, fair-skinned, vibrant, in a flowing gown, stood smiling. Behind her, a clean black Sienna van gleamed in the sun, and inside the van, two children peeped curiously. "Good afternoon," she said again. "Please, are you Mr. and Mrs. Nady?" They said nothing. "I'm sorry, maybe I should explain myself. My name is Chioma Oena Nady, and these are your grandchildren, Chitara and Ibube. We came to visit you. My husband said he needed to get something quickly from the next village. He will soon join us." It was as though time froze. The woman smiled even wider, oblivious to the storm rising in the old couple's chests. She opened the van door and helped the children out. "This is Ibube, he's 8, and this is Chitara, our last born, she's 6. Your grandchildren," she said proudly. Ifioma's lips trembled. Her hands flew to her chest. "My what? Grandchildren, Mama. Your son, Oena, is my husband." Nady swayed like a man slapped by an invisible hand. He blinked twice and stared at the children. The boy looked just like Oena at that age, the same stubborn chin, the same nose shaped like his mother's. And the girl, she had Ifioma's sharp eyes. Ifioma let out a wail, long and shrill like a widow's cry. "This is not possible. What sort of spirit is this? Oena is dead." Chioma's face twisted in confusion. "Dead? What do you mean? My husband is not dead. He just dropped us off. He's going to the next village to pick something from his friend." Nady's voice was like a whisper wrapped in thunder. "Our son died in an accident over 10 years ago. They told us he died. They buried him in Lagos." Chioma's smile slowly faded. "That can't be. My husband is alive. We've been married for 9 years. We met in Port Harcourt, then relocated to Asaba, where he started working with a construction company. He has never told me his parents were dead or missing. I insisted we come visit. He finally agreed this morning." Then, as though hearing the call of the dead, Nady turned and walked away, straight to the small grave under the Udala tree. He pointed to the clay slab that bore their son's name crudely etched into it. Oena Nady, born 1995, died 2020. Chioma followed behind him, her eyes wide, her heart pounding. No, no, this is not real. This must be another Oena. But deep in her heart, she knew. She had seen the pictures Oena never let her touch, the dusty family Bible he hid in a drawer. Once, she had seen the name Nady Omuozala scribbled in a folded paper and asked him about it. He lied and said it was a village his friend came from. "What is going on?" she whispered, gripping her children tightly. That night, Chioma waited in vain. Oena never returned. By the next morning, his phone was off. By the third day, it was clear he was never coming back. Rain began to fall on the 4th morning. It came slow and mournful, as though the clouds themselves were grieving with the Nady family. It tapped gently on the zinc roof like fingers tracing forgotten memories, and it soaked the dry brown earth that had not tasted such kindness in months. The villagers, who had watched the strange woman and her children settle in the compound of the long-silent Nadis, now whispered behind closed windows. "Did you see how the children look like Oena? She says she's his wife. But that boy died, didn't he? Maybe he faked his death, or maybe she's lying." But inside the old mud house, no one cared for gossip. Pain had taken up residence again. And this time, it wore many faces. Chioma had stopped crying. Her tears had dried up into a silence that wrapped her like a wet cloth. She sat on the old wooden bench in the parlor, her eyes blank, her arms folded across her chest. Her children, confused and restless, played quietly with old spoons and pebbles in the corner of the room. Nady sat across from her, staring, not at her, but through her, like she was a puzzle that had no end. Ifioma had not spoken since morning. She stayed in the kitchen, heating yam porridge no one would eat, humming to herself like someone who had wandered out of time. Chioma had waited for 3 days, holding onto the last thread of hope, that Oena would appear, smiling and ashamed, begging for forgiveness, explaining everything. But the fourth day killed all hope. She stood up that morning and walked to the front yard where the rain had just stopped. Mist still hovered in the air. Her children followed behind her like ducklings. "Papa," she said softly, "I need to ask you something." Nady looked up slowly. His face was heavy with age, but there was strength in his silence. "Did you bury him yourself?" "No," he replied. "We couldn't afford to travel. They said the burial was in Lagos. One man, his friend, handled everything. He sent us the death certificate. We believed it." Chioma nodded slowly, then sat on the wooden stool near the tree. "So it is possible he faked it." Silence. "Why would he do this?" she whispered, more to herself than to anyone. "Why would a man leave his parents to mourn him and start a new life like nothing happened? How can he sleep knowing you lit candles for him every year? Knowing I married a ghost?" Nady did not respond. Ifioma emerged from the back of the house, her wrapper stained with ashes from the kitchen. Her eyes were red, and her feet were slow, but her voice was sharp. Maybe he didn't want to be found. Maybe he was ashamed. Or maybe the city swallowed him. "But he married me," Chioma said, rising. "He gave me children. He built a life, and never told me he had a family that thought he was dead. What sort of man does that?" Nady's voice came low and bitter, the kind that chooses shame over truth. "He could not bear to tell us he lived. So he buried us instead." Ifioma sat down beside her. Her hand trembled slightly as she touched Chioma's arm. "My daughter," she said gently, "we don't blame you. You are not our pain. In fact, you are a strange kind of comfort. Through you, he gave us back something we thought we lost." Chioma broke then. She cried, not for herself, but for the lie that had shaped her life. She cried for her children, for their questions, for the name she had worn with pride, Mrs. Obina Nady, a name now soaked in betrayal. That evening, as the village returned to its usual rhythm, Chioma packed her bags. "I cannot stay here," she said. Nady and Ifioma were silent. "I love you both," she continued, "but I cannot raise my children with this confusion. Every corner of this house reminds me of him. Every face I see asks questions I cannot answer. I need to leave." Nady shifted uncomfortably. "You want to take the children?" Chioma paused. Then she knelt before them. "No, I cannot take them with me. They belong here now. They need you more than me. You will give them roots. I need to find myself again." Ifioma collapsed into tears. "No, please, don't leave them. Don't abandon them like he did." "I'm not abandoning them," Chioma replied, her voice cracking. "I'm giving them back what he stole from them, family." And with that, the woman who came with rain walked out of the compound the next morning, a small bag in her hand, tears in her eyes, and no destination in her heart. Nady watched her until she disappeared down the red path, swallowed by trees and silence. Then he turned and looked at the children who now stood holding hands beneath the Udala tree. Something warm stirred in his chest. For the first time in 10 years, he smiled. The house felt heavier after Chioma left, not with sadness alone, but with a strange stillness, like the earth itself had paused to watch what Nady and Ifioma would do next. The scent of her perfume still lingered in the corridor, and her laughter seemed to echo faintly against the cracked walls. She had left like a rain that came suddenly and washed the compound clean, leaving behind footprints and memories too heavy to sweep away. But the children remained. Chitara, the girl with bright eyes and a curious tongue, always wanted to ask questions. Ibube, the boy with the silent strength of a tree, always watched before he spoke. That morning, they sat at the edge of the veranda, legs dangling, eyes looking into a future too vast for their small minds. "Grandma," Chitara said, looking up as Ifioma brought out a bowl of okra and pap, "where did Mummy go?" Ifioma paused. "She went to find herself, my dear." "Is she lost?" "No." Ifioma smiled softly, setting the bowl down. "But sometimes, even big people get tired and need time to remember who they are." Ibube looked at the old woman, then at the food, and whispered, "Will she come back?" Ifioma didn't answer immediately. She stroked his head gently. "We don't know. But for now, she left you in our care, and we won't let you feel alone." Nady stood in the doorway, his arms crossed, his eyes glassy. "Your mother may have left," he said gruffly, "but you too are not orphans. You are Nady's children, and you will be raised with honor." From that day on, life slowly began to stir again in the compound. Umuozala villagers were first skeptical. They peeped through hedges, gossiped under mango trees, and whispered in the evening markets. Can they take care of children in their old age? Those children look healthy, oh? Maybe they've come with their father's spirit. A beg, as long as those children don't disappear like their father. But over time, the whispers faded. What remained was admiration. Nady, once stooped and silent, now rose early each morning to take Ibube around the farm, teaching him to weed, to plant yam, to pluck ripe pawpaw. He carved the boy a small cutlass and told him stories of their ancestors by moonlight. Ibube followed him everywhere, always asking questions. Papa, what does this tree mean? Why do lizards nod their heads? Why does the sun sleep behind the hill? And Nady, who once had no reason to speak, now found joy in answering. Ifioma, on the other hand, taught Chitara to fetch water from the stream, to pound cocoyam with rhythm, to sing folk songs that made the birds answer. Every evening, they would sit on a bamboo mat outside, peeling groundnuts and talking like mother and daughter. You have your mother's beauty, Ifioma would say, brushing Chitara's hair. Was my father beautiful too? Ifioma's hands would slow. She would nod. He was, until life stained him. The New Yam Festival came that year like a second birth. It was the first time the Nady compound opened its gate in a decade. Children ran in and out, laughter bounced off walls, and villagers who had once mourned now brought gifts of yams and palm wine, amazed at the transformation. The children danced, Chitara in a yellow wrapper with beads in her hair, and Ibube in a small red cap, holding his grandfather's walking stick like a staff of honor. Even the Igwe, village king, took notice. He sent messengers bearing kola nuts and said, "The gods have remembered you, Nady. The children you raise will rise like irako trees." That night, as the festival fires died down and stars blinked above like the eyes of ancestors, Nady sat with Ifioma on the wooden bench beneath the Udala tree. "She may never come back," Ifioma whispered, her voice low. "Let her go," Nady replied. "She came to give us back what we lost. That is enough." They sat in silence for a while, watching the moon climb slowly across the sky. Then Chitara ran out with a wrapper half-tied, shouting, "Grandma, Ibube is writing his name on the wall again." Ifioma sighed and rose. Nady chuckled. That night, he dreamt for the first time in years. He saw Oena standing by the riverbank, smiling but silent, fading slowly like mist over water. And in the dream, he did not cry. 10 years later, a new house stood where the old one once did, built with blocks, painted cream and green, with a gate painted in village red. Inside were laughter, books, stories, and pictures. One of Chioma, frozen in time with the children in her arms. Another of Oena, quietly framed and hung beside the door, not as a reminder of betrayal, but of where the journey began. Ibube grew into a tall, brilliant young man. He became the first child from Umuozala to gain admission into the University of Medicine in Enugu. Chitara, ever spirited, got a scholarship to a girls' college in Aka. She wrote poems in Igbo and won awards for them. They never forgot their roots. And every New Yam festival, they returned home to sit beneath the Udala tree with Nady and Ifioma, now older, gentler, wrapped in layers of joy and gray hair. Sometimes, when the wind blew just right, Ifioma would sit quietly with a distant look in her eyes and say, "That rain, the one that brought the children, it was a gift from the gods." And the villagers would nod, because sometimes grief plants seeds, and sometimes those seeds grow into children.